Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Walking Dead in Defense of, a series in which I look at some of the characters on the show who haven't exactly been a hit with the majority of fans, and try to put forward my argument as to why they perhaps deserve a second chance. In this installment I'll be looking at the man with all the guts, Spencer Monroe, so without further ado let's begin. I feel like Spencer may well be one of the most misunderstood characters that have featured on the show. Whilst most Walking Dead viewers see him as a whining, traitorous backstabber who ultimately got what he deserved when Negan killed him, I instead see him as a bit of a tragic character who gets a lot of undeserved hate. Many fans seem to despise him due to the fact that he disagreed with some of Rick's methods, with his character becoming increasingly vocal about this as his time on the show reached its conclusion. However, I believe that when you look at what Spencer went through, he was certainly more than entitled to foster a sense of hatred towards our bearded protagonist. To understand why I believe this, it's important to take a look at things from Spencer's point of view, so let's examine exactly why he and the Rick-tator clash so often. It really does seem that no matter where Rick goes, he always brings trouble with him, and once the gates of the walled community of Alexandria opened the doors to him and his people, things started to quickly go downhill for the residents, especially the Monroe family. In the space of little to no time at all, Spencer lost his brother and his dad. And although Rick can hardly be blamed for the death of his brother, he does have to at least shoulder some responsibility for the death of his father, Reg. I mean, yes, he didn't exactly kill him, but if Rick hadn't gotten involved with Jessie and her husband, it can be argued that the chain of events set in motion which went on to cause Pete to slash Reg's throat would have not taken place. Now, I'm not suggesting for one moment that Rick wasn't correct in taking some kind of action against Pete, but beating the crap out of a guy who has a violent temper was probably not the best way to handle the situation. It was obvious that Pete wouldn't simply be able to overlook his beating and would need someone to take his frustration out on. Unfortunately for poor old Spencer, it just so happened to be his dad who ended up suffering the repercussions. Sadly, this wasn't the end of his family's tragedy, as his mum Deanna ended up being bitten by a walker after Alexandria became swarmed by a herd. Again, Rick wasn't the person who directly killed her, but it was his decision making once again that led to her demise. Let's not forget it was Rick's incredibly dumb plan to lead away a huge herd of walkers in the first place that led to Alexandria being overrun and Spencer's mum dying. Of course, Rick didn't know the wolves would attack and screw his entire plan up, but if Rick had simply decided to leave the walkers be, things wouldn't have ended up being so dire after the wolves had been taken care of. And whilst I am on the subject of the wolves' attack, it can be argued that if it weren't for Spencer taking out the truck driver who was intent on smashing through the walls of Alexandria, Alexandria may have been filled with walkers a lot sooner than it actually was. Of course, you could say that it was the truck horn that set the walkers off in the first place, and therefore Spencer was partly to blame himself, but let's be honest, if Spencer hadn't killed the driver, he would have probably most likely continued to drive through Alexandria until he either crashed or someone took him out, which would have resulted in the same thing anyway. 5 episodes after the Walker attack, we witness Spencer attempting to shimmy along a grappling rope from inside Alexandria to a watchtower situated outside the walls. After Spencer begins to continue further across, the rope begins to slack, resulting in him falling into a group of the undead. Rick is reluctant to even help the guy. Instead, it actually takes Tara to start shooting walkers around Spencer for Rick to finally offer a helping hand. I will admit that Spencer's attempt to escape Alexandria was a bit silly, but you can understand why he didn't end up being Rick's best pal, seeing as the guy didn't even give a shit that he nearly died. In fact, Rick chastised Tara for trying to save an Alexandrian, and also Spencer in regards to his antics, and told him that he wanted every idea run past him first. Spencer replied by asking if Rick would have even listened to him anyway, and to be honest, I don't really think he would have done. During the first half of Season 6 in particular, Rick never saw the Alexandrians as his people, and it often seemed that he thought he was above them. One of my complaints I made in my video about why I dislike Season 6 revolves around how much I hate Rick's constant lecturing of the residents of Alexandria. It was almost as if he thought he was better than all of them, and I'm sure some of the Alexandrians noticed this, Spencer included. With that in mind, can anyone really blame Spencer for trying to take action into his own hands and not consult Rick first? I for one certainly don't. I want to now look at Spencer's and Rick's confrontations during Season 7. Spencer didn't have a huge amount of screen time during said season, but when he did, he was shown becoming increasingly rebellious in his attitude towards Rick. During the episode's service, Spencer called out Rick, saying what a mess of a situation he had led the community of Alexandria into. and I have to say he does have a bit of a point. It was Rick's cockiness and arrogance that led him to completely underestimate the Saviours, which prompted a response from Negan which led to 2 of his best friends dying. The point I'm trying to make is that I don't think Rick is an incredible leader by any means, and I actually like the fact that in Spencer there was a character on the show who wasn't afraid to challenge its choices. With everyone else just following his will blindly, I feel that the program needed someone to take a step back and say, Rick, what the hell are you doing? And Spencer was that guy. Unfortunately, I feel that a great deal of people who watch The Walking Dead will trust in Rick's decisions no matter what, simply because he's the main character, and therefore have a feeling of hate towards Spencer due to him being the person second guessing Rick. I still find it kind of disappointing that when Spencer died, his death was met with cheers instead of sadness. I don't think for one moment at all that Spencer approached Negan because he wanted him to kill Rick. Instead, I think he was just extremely naive in thinking that somehow he could get through to the Saviour's boss. We must remember that at this moment in time, Alexandria was in a pretty dire situation due to being under Negan's thumb, with Rick sending out most of his crew to scavenge supplies for the Saviours. To say things weren't great is a bit of an understatement, and I'm really not surprised that Spencer, a man who felt that Rick was leading Alexandria completely off into the deep end, decided to try and make a change. Unfortunately for him, Negan didn't like what he had to say. I know I've spent an awful amount of time talking about Rick in a video that's supposed to be about Spencer, but as already stated, I feel that the main reason Spencer gets so much hate is because he was willing to disagree with Rick. Rick is far from perfect. Over the course of the show he has messed up time and time again, and should take some responsibility for the deaths and pain that he has caused. In Spencer we got someone whose closest family members were taken away, arguably due to the choices Rick made. Yet for some strange reason, the audience, instead of siding with Spencer, just seems to have this opinion of him that he's a scheming, moaning snake, when in fact he's actually far from it. I'll admit there are things that he did that were just plain wrong, such as when he stole food from the pantry after shouting at everyone else for doing the same beforehand, but on the whole I feel his character is actually quite hard done by. I honestly feel the show needs more characters like Spencer. Rick does a lot of stupid things, yet for some reason no one even bats an eyelid. Spencer however had the guts to oppose him, and although that's something most people dislike about him, for me it's the one thing I enjoy most about his character. So there you have it, my case for Spencer Monroe. Perhaps you agree with me and have changed your mind, or perhaps you disagree with me and still dislike Spencer. Regardless of what you think, please let me know, and as always, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.